journalist Javed Rana is joining us from all the way capital of Pakistan, Islamabad. Mr. Rana, thank you so much for joining us here on A News once again. Let's start by asking the first question. What are the immediate humanitarian implications for the Israeli offensive in Gaza and Lebanon for civilians in the affected areas as well?
Well, so far as the humanitarian implications are concerned, that is the least concerned by Israel, that is the least concerned by the US, and that is the least concerned by the other Western capitals. I think this is also very ironically also least concerned by most of the Muslim countries, particularly the Arab countries, the neighboring Arab countries. So everybody knows the scale of the humanitarian disaster in Gaza, the scale of now a growing humanitarian disaster in Lebanon. But who cares? That is a bigger question. Why there is so much insensitivity? There seems to be desensitization. And it seems that there is also kind of a normalization of a desensitization of the genocide happening in Gaza. And particularly in the northern Gaza, where now Israel is operating, and UN now calls it, UN officials are calling it genocide within a genocide, which means that now the genocide is in a more aggressive form in the northern Gaza. People are not allowed to leave that territory and they are being bombed. They are being told this particular site is going to be the safe zone. When people gather there, they bomb them. Right from the day one, like me, so many other people are saying, Israel, in a very systematic manner, is straight away depopulating Gaza. They are creating very tough conditions in Gaza, very tough conditions, so that no one lives there. They want everybody to flee from there. There are at least 400,000 people in the northern Gaza who are trapped. For the last 10 days, no food trucks has been allowed to get in. Reason being is that they want to starve them to the death. The militant groups, jihadi groups, more particularly Hamas, they are under the tunnels. They are not on the ground. They are operating from there. Why they are punishing the common people in Gaza? The reason is quite clear that Israel is the least concerned. You may recall the initial statements when October 7 happened. The Israel defense minister said, no aid, no electricity, no water. And that was clear indication of a genocide. The International Criminal Court's investigation has concluded. They have found Netanyahu as a war criminal, defense minister as a war criminal. But the point is, who is going to act on that investigation? Now, International Criminal Court is not acting, and its judges are now acting on the investigations which has already been concluded for obvious political reasons. They hasten to declare Russian President Putin as a war criminal, but they are now reluctant to conclude this proceeding. So I think clearly, it is Israel, the apartheid state, which is basically trampling the so-called international world order under its feet. You may recall, just recently, rather it is still going on, the Israeli military has been attacking the UN peacekeeping forces in the southern Lebanon. The reason being is they don't want the peacekeepers to be there to watch what is happening there. Israel is simply expanding in Lebanon as well, because Lebanon is also part and parcel of a greater Israel project. Gradually they are moving very slowly, they are moving about it. All these Arab countries and Muslim countries, mostly they are spectators. They are doing nothing. So I think as we speak, you may recall that now nobody talks about the peace initiative on Gaza. Nobody talks about a peace initiative on Lebanon. The reason being is the kind of the fake narrative that the USA had built up, that it is a matter of time, within a few days this peace agreement going to be there. There's going to be ceasefire. That was a kind of a justification that US was providing in practically to the Israel to continue with the genocide. Now even they are not saying it. USA now is going to export the most advanced anti-missile shields to the Israel. And that is known as the third anti-missile shield. They are going to be exported to the Israel. And with that, they think they can stop Hezbollah's attacks. Hezbollah now finally, it seems to be militarily speaking, putting its house in order. They are retaliating in a manner which is giving very tough time to Israel, particularly in the northern Israel. That indicates that this war is far from over. This is going to be a long war, which Israel will continue in the neighboring countries. And I think we should not now see that this is going to end. Once Lebanon's project is concluded, then the next target is obviously Iran. And that would mean this entire Middle East would erupt into a far bigger war, which may not be controllable.
And let's talk about all of these and more about the international organizations. Let's move from that as well, such as the United Nations. And responding to the escalating violence, what actions are they taking to address the humanitarian crisis? Because I know that we have been talking about it for a while with you, and we have been repeatedly highlighting the fact that this stuff is not being resolved as much as it is needed through the international humanitarian organizations as well.
I think it appears to be a helplessness situation when it comes to the rest of the world as compared to the Western world. Because as we speak, the UN General Secretary, he made certain statements. Israel has declared him a persona non grata. His entry has been banned in Israel. Some of the UN agencies has been declared to be linked with the terrorists, and they are not going to be allowed to work in the occupied West Bank. And from Gaza, they have already practically expelled them. And after killing hundreds of the members of the UN agencies and other aid agencies. So I think in a broader picture, the international community, the genuine international community, which involves the UN General Assembly, all feel helpless because they have passed so many resolutions. But that is useless because it is the UN Security Council which has to act. And that is where the real problem lies. That is where the US is sitting. Every resolution that the international community has come up with, US has straight away vetoed it. Since US is providing all kind of weaponry support, all kind of intelligence support, and now the American military foot would be on the ground in Israel because the third is a kind of a anti-missile system which cannot be operated by the people, by the military men in Israel. So US is going to send and dispatch it's at least as many as 100 members of the military. They are going to handle it. So USA is now directly involved in this battle. So I think in a broader picture, this situation is not tenable in the sense that there is going to be a bigger conflict in the Middle East. It is simply a matter of time. Everybody is waiting what kind of response the apartheid state Israel is going to come up with to the Iranian retaliation a couple of weeks ago. And I think that is going to determine the shape of Middle East. In what shape Middle East is going to be there in days and weeks and in years to come. Because it is quite clear now that Netanyahu is not going to let the peace to have its feet on the ground. It is not going to happen. I think this war will continue in one way or the other.
About this continuation, let's also talk about the risks that are associated with the escalation of hostilities as well, because you are saying that there are actual problems, actual risks that is being taken. And I would like to learn about the particularly concerning potential for the wider regional war involving multiple actors, because the more the conflict continues, the more the analysts are talking about it. Do you think the situation is going to evolve into something even bigger, or are we going to say that it is probably going to de-escalate, at least stay in one part of the world, such as in Middle East and in general as well?
That's a very important question. I think the previous attack by Iran, there are no credible reports. Scott Ritter, the former UN weapons inspector, according to him, Iran had a full coordination with the USA. The CIA chief had a meeting with the Iranians in some Middle Eastern country. And then it was decided in that meeting in what manner this attack is going to be there on Israel. And Americans had told Iran that they need to make it sure that the civilians are not killed in any attack. So that means that the 180 missiles which were launched from Iran, and they hit parts of Israel, they were actually aimed at not to causing any major damage to Israel, so that there is no major conflict. So I think there were precautions which Iran exercised. But now it seems that if Israel does not exercise any precautions and it retaliates in a manner which is a disproportionate, something Israel has been doing with every non-state actor in the occupied Palestine and also in Lebanon, I think that would simply means there is a possibility of a nuclear conflict, and that possibility is a real. Iran is at the edge of manufacturing the nuclear bomb, and some people say there are some credible reports suggesting that probably they have already manufactured or they are very close to make it. If Israel carries out attack on the Iranian nuclear installation, that would mean that Iran could retaliate maybe with a nuclear strike. And Israel would have their second strike capability. And that could possibly land this entire region on fire. That would mean disaster. That would be recipe for disaster. That could possibly lead to the Third World War. So I think the situation is on a slippery rock. Anything can happen.
Anything can happen. It is an important statement to say as of this point, because we are actually trying to face the world which has incredibly changing in the moments, because we are having elections in the United States, we are having the escalation that is happening in the Middle East, we are talking about the things that is happening with Ukraine and Russia and everything else being clashed against each other. We are facing a regional power struggle in everywhere, every day. So let's talk about Iran and Saudi Arabia as well. They have roles in this regional power struggle. So who's likely to play in response to the Israeli military actions in Gaza and Lebanon? What would you say about those two actors?
Well, I think in case there is a bigger conflict between Iran and Israel, Saudi Arabia would be an isolated actor. It would not intervene. It would not support Iran because it had very long, drawn behind the scene a kind of a conflict that we don't see generally. There is a sectarian angle. There's also a kind of a competition of being a regional power. So I think Saudis are not going to intervene, and and I don't expect the other Arab countries are going to retaliate. So I think it's going to be Iran, supported by Russia, at least Russia's weapons, and Iran's proxies. They would be in action, and that will be the scene of this battle. This war is going to expand. It's Yemen, it's in Iraq, it's in Syria. So I think that is a kind of a picture that we are seeing, then obviously the oil prices will jump up, and there would be a bigger world economic crisis. And this would not just confine to the Middle East. It will be in Europe. It will be in the rest of the world. So I think this is just a tip of the iceberg of the situation. And then the countries like Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran is going to draw more strength, and those people would be recruited. They are already trained. Iran has admittedly said that it has trained at least 300,000 militants from across the region. I think they will be in action. And but more than that, I think it is the nuclear disaster that seems to be in sight if the peace deal does not take place. But with regard to the US presidential election, I think that is going to determine the future of the next superpower. If the Donald Trump comes into power, the chances of which are high if he is not assassinated, because there have been one assassination attempt on him, and there were two other potential assassination attempts which have been prevented. I think there is a possibility, because the Donald Trump's return to power simply means that the Russia wins war against Ukraine straight away. All military weapon supplies are going to be stopped by the USA under Donald Trump. That is something the CIA doesn't want that to happen, and that is why we are seeing that the deep state in the USA, they are trying to assassinate Donald Trump. So in case Donald Trump is there, that means the world order is going to be changed. Israel has already sufficiently damaged that so-called world order that was started off after World War II. I think that elections are extremely important. That is going to come down hard on the international geostrategic landscape. This is extremely important election which is going to happen. So in a broader picture, with the Trump in place, means that the Trump is going to put more pressure on the Muslim countries to normalize ties with Israel, despite this genocide. That has been Trump's policy. Trump doesn't want more wars. And because his policy right from the day one, if you look at what happened in Afghanistan, because the peace deal with the Afghan Taliban happened under his administration. And similarly, he's got the same policy when it comes to Ukraine. He says that he is going to create conditions where the Russian president and the Ukraine's president, they meet and they decide everything on the negotiating table. That will be disaster for the European politics. That would be disaster for the NATO. And I think in that context, we need to look at how things unfold. But certainly there are some takeaway points. And those takeaway points are that it seems the US is on its last leg of so-called superpower. After these elections, things are going to be very clear. And then it seemed that we are heading towards a long-drawn insurgency in the Middle East, because Israel's aggression in Lebanon, in Gaza, and elsewhere, that means that there will be more recruitment for these militant groups, and there will be more attacks on Israel. Israel has created far more number of enemies now than were before October 7 last year. So I think we are on a slippery rock. Let's see how things unfold. But it seems whatever Israel is doing right now, it is going to bring a kind of a recipe for disaster, not only for the Israel, but also those countries who are silent right now.
So about the negotiation table and the long-drawn aggression that you're talking about, let's take a different point of view, and I really like to pick your mind on that as well. I do wonder if you are talking about the aggression of the Israel continuing in the Middle East, even though the clashes come and go, Israel's aggression actually stays true inside the Palestine and the Palestinians towards Palestinians as well. So it is not actually, we are talking that it has been happening since the October last year, but it has been going on since the 1940s. So do you think that the degree of their attack, degree of their intensity towards Palestinians are going to continue in this level from now on? Because now that they have actually show the world that they can do it and they can get it done without having to see any consequences? Or is it at least going to die down a little bit?
I don't see any let up to the Israeli aggression onto Gaza, onto the West Bank, and the other parts of the occupied territories where Palestinians are living. So I think in a broader picture, in a similar fashion, I foresee that the situation in Lebanon is not going to be very different. Israel is making more and more incursions deep into the southern part of Lebanon, and they want to stay there. They want to create a kind of a buffer zone. That is the least thing they're going to settle down. And there is a possibility that this time around it would occupy more and more territories. So this aggression would certainly continue. But again, what Iran can do, Iran has right now, as we speak, the proxies which are very active, which are religiously motivated, and I think they will stay active. Israel has undermined the power of these proxies. We have seen that despite the fact that there have been assassinations of Hezbollah's leaders and commanders one after the other, Hezbollah has now managed to retaliate and give tough time to Israel in the northern part of the apartheid state. And the injuring of 61 people and the killing of the 4 Israeli soldiers just within last 12 hours, that is a bigger indicator. That is a bigger indicator that the proxies cannot be ignored. They will continue to retaliate. They will continue to give very, very tough time to Israel. But again, that as has been the track record, it would happen again at the cost of the human lives in Lebanon, and also in Gaza, and also in the occupied West Bank. Israel continued to occupy more and more territory through settlers in the occupied West Bank. And again, I think US is trying to modify its world order when it comes to the Middle East. But I think in that attempt, it may lose whatever the little leverage it has right now in the Middle East. They are trying to create a situation where Iran does not call shots in the Middle East, where any retaliation, any support, any resistance to the Israel is one way or the other is subsided. This is not going to happen because Russia would not let Iran to fall. And the fact that Iran is at the verge of manufacturing nuclear weapons, Iran would not end up the way Israel wishes that it would happen. This is not going to happen. I think all these neighboring countries, if there is a nuclear clashes between two countries, that is not going to confine to these two countries. In between there is Iraq, in between there is Syria, and then there are all the neighboring countries, Lebanon and Eastern Mediterranean. And even I would say that so far as the disaster of the nuclear war is concerned, that will go across the world. Sooner or later, God forbid, if that kind of situation develops, because American at this particular point of time, not taking the nuclear threats from Russia seriously. They are saying it's a just bluff, but I think Russia can possibly retaliate. If US provides more lethal weapons to Ukraine and Ukraine hits hard in the heart of Russia, I think that is where possibly Russia can also retaliate, and the kind of the threats that Russia right from the day one has been giving, I think they can execute those threats onto the Europe.
And lastly, let's talk about the situation about the nuclear powers, because you mentioned that and it is quite important. Do you expect anyone to use those nuclear powers anytime soon?
Well, I think again, at this particular point of time, we need to look at in what manner Israel going to retaliate, and in what manner it is going to carry out attack on Iran. If Iran's nuclear infrastructure is destroyed, there is a greater possibility of a bigger conflict that can possibly end up in exchange of the nuclear strikes between two countries. That is one such possibility. And if Israel restricts itself to carrying out attacks on Iranian military bases or Iranian oil infrastructure, then there is a possibility that there will be a conventional war. At least it will continue maybe for days or maybe for weeks. But saying that there, at this particular point of time, I would not say that there would be nuclear war, because I would say that if Iranian nuclear installations are hit, then there is a real danger, and that cannot be ruled out, that there is a possibility that Iran may hit back with Israel. And remember, Iran is a big country in terms of territories. It has, strategically speaking, it has a depth which Israel doesn't have. If there is any nuclear strike on Israel, or even if there are 2,000 missiles, ballistic missiles attack on Israel, and they are precisely targeted on the military installations, Israel may cease to exist.
That is quite interesting insight, and thank you so much, Javed. It was very insightful that we have had so much to talk about, and we tried to put them in the places, but we know, as we've spoken, the situation that is happening all around the world is quite hectic, and we will need to talk about it even more in the upcoming days and weeks. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, it was a pleasure.
The growing tide of anti-Israel sentiments. What you see behind me is just tip of the iceberg of what is happening in the country. More than half of $52 billion black CIA budget is spent on espionage network in Pakistan. How would you handle it?
The US has looked upon Pakistan as an ally at one point and then as an enemy at the same time.
That is going to be the first legal reason on the basis of which he is going to be instantly ousted by the Supreme Court of Pakistan.
Joining us live, Javed Rana, who's an expert on politics and geo-strategic issues.
In the world politics, which is not being driven by any moral principle, it is being driven by the hard geo-strategic realities. In a broader picture, more countries would aspire to have nuclear weapons.